Today in our road to Unicum, we look at the M4A1, a Tier 8 French premium tank known as the Ravioli. This tank has a pretty unique play style, and so we're going to break it down over two battles, the first being a Tier 10 Malinovka, and the second being a Tier 10 Tundra battle. And this will give me the opportunity to show how to correctly play this tank in different situations. Now, Malinovka has a lot of open ground. It's very much a vision control game, with the exception of the brawling that happens up at the top of the northeast hill. Now, it's important to note the downsides of this tank, its weaknesses. It has a very tall profile, squishy armor, so it's a big soft target, and it has, for a medium, a limited speed of 40 kilometers an hour, plus sluggish acceleration and limited hull traverse. So you can't really get out of a bad situation with this tank quickly without taking damage. And this is one of those tanks where if you need to run before you need to run, if that makes sense. So given that I'm a Tier 8, I'm going to be playing off the front sniper line a little bit. Now, if I were in a medium tank with good speed and especially with a good turret, I'd be up where the TVP is, or alternately pushing up toward around C6, C7. But I'll talk about that later. I'll go there later, but not at the start when there are still 15 enemy guns on the field. It's too risky. Being back where I am on this sniper's hill, you're able to fire on tanks down at their sniper's hill at F7 and against their tanks that are approaching hill, and you're unlikely to get spotted. So this is a very safe place to start, but it does provide me with a pretty good field of fire covering the eastern and northern half of the map. Now, I never play the southern half of the map. Really, the only thing to do to go south is to push very much to the corner where their T-25 pilot is. And generally speaking, you can only do that if you're in a medium tank that's pretty good at brawling, and at least one other tank goes with you. And I find it's way too funneled and narrow, and once you get there, there's really no getting out of that situation unless you win it. Whereas, up here where I'm playing, I can fire in tanks south, I can fire in tanks directly east of me and up on the hill. Super flexible. So I've talked about the downsides of the tank. Let's talk about what makes the Ravioli fun to play. It has unusually good alpha of 390 for a Tier 8, so when you hit tanks, it hits hard. It has awesome gun handling and very good accuracy of 0.35, and it has 10 degrees of gun depression, so the gun is very workable in a lot of situations. And last but not least, the tank fires APCR as the default ammo, and it has really high shell velocity, so you can hit tanks 400 meters away, 500 meters away, and the shell will travel there in the blink of an eye, which is great for hitting moving targets or targets about to hide themselves. So you can see they've got a lot of tanks pushing up along the zero lane, and that's fine. All I need at any given point of time is one target that I can fire at. A lot of their tanks are correctly pushing up along the red line, which is what you should do if you want to push hill. What we don't know yet is where their other tanks are deployed. Typically, you can expect 1 to 2 tanks down at F7 on their sniper's hill. So, we're kind of just hanging out until that E7, F7 area is spotted a little bit more. And as a habit, you can see that Emil started to back up, and then I call for fire on this Lova because I noticed that he is tracked. So this is a great opportunity to take a tank off the field, and again, that shell velocity is just awesome. So I'm still waiting to some degree to see when of their other tanks are spotted. Our TVP has taken some damage, so it definitely points to there being at least one tank around that F7 area. And it may look like that being too passive, but there's really not anything that you can safely do in the Ravioli in a Tier 10 battle on this map without giving up hit points unnecessarily. It's one of those things, you can be too passive and too campy playing a tank that is good at sniping, and the Ravioli is excellent at sniping, but given that it is a medium, it can do other things like flex too. I'm watching the map, and we have a Conqueror pushing down. I'll get to that in a minute. So, okay, this AMX-30 had pushed up pretty aggressively, and the TVP and I punished him. And look at this, enemy LTTB was sitting too high up on that hill, and as soon as he got spotted, he just got obliterated. Now, this AMX-30B is pushing very aggressively. The place he's going is actually a pretty good spot if you've got Overwatch coverage behind you, but he moved up with only a small amount of hit points, so I pushed up aggressively and finished him off. And now I'm going to go to this spot, which if I were in a different tank, like a light tank or in a fast medium, especially with a good turret, I would come here at the start of the game and spot by this little ridge carefully, because what you can do is catch tanks that are from your viewpoint going from right to left and get full flanking shots like I just took on that Chrysler. But you can do that early game, and it's a super easy way to get a lot of early damage for your team, and early damage wins games. And I'm picking these guys apart. The only person who has a field of fire from their side might be their Centurion, and he just hit me right there, so he's not spotted yet. But our tanks on Hill have done a great job. They've pushed up and around. The Conqueror is going to proxy spot the Centurion soon, and so I'm keeping my eye out in that direction. Okay, there's the Centurion. He's going to have to back up, which is an easy kill shot with this laser gun. Alright, now I'm going to move up again. I did get some spotters credit, and you know what's awesome here is I keep having shots on tanks that are facing directly to the north or to my left, and so this is giving me easy, safe shots that I can take. And even if those tanks were looking in my direction, I could still try snapshotting. You want to be careful about that because, again, this tank is really squishy. But you know, one other important thing to do is to keep an account of how many tanks have been spotted. So most of their tanks are along that K lane. There's one tank that hasn't been spotted, but at that point, you know, even if he's somewhere south and he starts shooting at me, I can keep running until I can find some cover. And we've got our Centurion 7-1 and T95 all the way down past their spawn now. So even if there's a tank spotted, it's unlikely that I'm going to die as long as I am mindful of my terrain. And then we spot their 5100 in the back here, and then after hitting him, I'm going to back down just a little bit to get below the ridge so that he can't three-shot me. And then as my gun starts to reload, I'm going to get in position. A lot of these enemy tanks, this is one of those situations where you can farm people pretty easily because they're not looking at you. They're too fixated on the tanks in front of them. And now I can use the decent mobility of this tank to push up and get some cleanup damage. Because I have such high hit points, you know, with the exception of the JPE 100, none of these guys are going to one-shot me. You know, like the T30 could potentially shoot me, except his turret is aiming to the north or to my left, so I can take my time in and farm this JPE 100 for damage. It's kind of a shame that I missed that second shot on the 5120. You know, there's like a little bit of a ridge, and I shot a touch too low. But I'm going to go ahead and get up alongside this T95. And this is so funny here, I forgot that the Leopard was still alive. And if I had only been paying a little bit better attention here, I think I would have gotten this final kill. But even as it is, watch how good the gun handling is on this gun. I go ahead and settle down, and as the Leo starts to straighten out, I had a kill shot there. And then that doofus ran into me. It was a pretty sweet game, you know. And I think the good thing about the Ravioli, from a balance perspective, like I see two good paths for wargaming putting premiums in this game. The first is to create a tank which has different characteristics from any normal tech tree non-premium tank, but is balanced between strengths and weaknesses. And you know, like I said, this tank is balanced because of it has a, I forgot to mention this earlier, but a relatively long reload, you know, limited mobility for a medium tank, squishy, and it's a big profile, right? So, you know, the gun is a joy to fire, and the handling of it makes this a lot of fun. The characteristics of this tank can make it difficult to carry in situations, especially if your heavy tanks are bad. You know, it's also true of a lot of light tanks. But that's one route. So, you know, Wargaming can release premium tanks that are different from other tanks, but that have strengths and weaknesses, so by and large, it's reasonably balanced. And then the second thing, you know, Wargaming can do is to release premium versions of very similar tanks to non-premiums. You know, the great example I gave in the Thunderbolt video was the Cromwell B and the Cromwell. And then that way, you know, people who want to spend money on the game can do so and, you know, get the benefits of, you know, extra credit, you know, income as well as crew training, but not create a situation where it's, you know, pay to win tank or pay for advantage tank. Okay, so in Tundra, the hill is really important. I push up a bit aggressively here, and then when the 121 pops out, you know, we exchange shots, but he hits my engine, and so you need that engine to be able to move back and forth to safely brawl. Now, going up to the hill, you have two options. You can either come up to where I am, or you can sit in the southeast corner down where their Batchat 25 TAP is. Now, the only thing about sitting where that Batchat 25 is that you are essentially waiting for someone to stick themselves out where you can fire at them, right? So you have to wait until other people give you a shot. Whereas with that Ravioli there, what I can do is watch the enemy tanks that are nearby, and when they fire, move up to safely shoot them during their reload. And that's a big reason why there's a big difference between sniping the back versus being more active. And even though the Ravioli is not a brawling tank and that I don't have a strong turret, like the 121 that I'm facing, it's still good to come up here and actively support this push. And I love what our Emil does here. He's going to move up, and he is not in the line of fire of the 121, so he's bullying these squishy tanks that are above the hill. It's an aggressive play, and where he is not already safe, but I appreciate that he did that, put some pressure on some of their tanks. And then looking at the mini-map here, you can see there's a T-28 prod. He had been spotted down in the ditch, but now he's pushed up, and he is isolated. So anytime you see tanks overextend, and they're not going to be able to get help, this is a very good time to push up. Now, there is the possibility that their tanks could peek out who are on hill and aim down and shoot us, but to do so, they have to, terrifically overexpose their tank. And so, to some degree, this is a reasonably safe place to go if if you know you've got Overwatch coverage. And I have auto aim turned on, and this is one of these situations where I should have just turned it off and aimed properly, because where the auto aim is right now is aiming toward his kind of the bottom of his turret, which is a terrible place to shoot. And I get lucky that he misses his extra shot. I turn off auto aim and then just simply aim anywhere along the side hull of his tank, and that's an easy kill. Alright, so I should have lost another chunk of hit points to that T-28 prod, so I'm very fortunate, and that ends up being decisive later. But a lot of times what I've noticed, when you pressure tanks, they tend to rush. People tend to panic. That's the bottom line. They know they're going to die, kind of lose their cool a bit. And they originally kind of had, you could argue, the slightly stronger, position on hill. But we've been able to whittle down their tanks. And our guys have played it much smarter in terms of brawling. Like this guy right here should not be crossing. If he needed to run, he needed to have run 20 seconds ago and exited off the northwest corner of the hill. And this is like one of these things, if you're in a squishy tank, especially if you've got speed, don't wait too long to run. Run before you need to run. If you wait too long, you're always going to eat unnecessary damage, and it just doesn't make much sense. Since we have a 10-6 advantage, we really need to keep pushing up here aggressively. Now, if that 704 had been aiming this way, that could have ended very badly for me. But in most situations, when you're starting to, when the momentum swing in your favor, a lot of times TDs will back off, which they should, to either find hard cover or distance that allows them to work. All right, we've got a JPE 100. That's a pretty fearsome tank. It can easily one-shot me for my remaining hit points, but this gullet down here is often where Artie is, so I come up on the hill to the left and aim down to the right. Meanwhile, this keeps the hill between us and the JPE 100, so he can't shoot us. Like, a lot of players would incorrectly drive toward the Arties and cross the field of fire of the JPE 100. We don't have to do that to kill the Arties. All we need to do is just, like I said, climb up the hill here on the left, look down on the right, and then finish off these Arties. And once we've killed these Arties, that gives us a huge tactical advantage. Well, I should say, actually, I think our Artie's dead, but if we still had our Arties, then we could just take our time finishing these tanks, because this is such an open map. So we have 3 tanks that can potentially shoot on this 704, and this JPE 100, I can look just by looking at the map there, he's still facing this direction. That's a no-go. I don't want to risk getting one shot for my remaining hit points, so I'm going to go around, see if I can get some cheeky shots on that 704. Most important thing to do in a situation like this is understand the situation. 704 can one-shot me, so I don't want to engage him in a frontal brawl where I'm going to concede the first shot advantage, especially since I'm a turreted tank. And then we do have a Mutz providing overwatch above us, so I'm able to hit the 704. But the 704, I think he basically realizes he needs to do something. He can't sit there and be too passive, and so he chases me down the hill, and this is where the limited mobility of this tank can be really pretty difficult. And I try to get a track shot, don't get it. I get super lucky right there. The 704 low rolled on me, and then this right here, I get very salty at this 50B. A couple things. So he keeps running into me. The 50B is a really heavy ramming tank. I very easily could have died, and lost my last 30 hit points when he came tearing around the corner. The 50B, what he should have done, as soon as I shot the 704 and it was clear the 704 was going to keep coming after me around the corner, the 50B should have gone counterclockwise around the hill. Or alternatively, he could have come where I am and wait until the 704 shoots at me and then, finish him off. But he waited on the direct opposite side of the rocks. When he realized the 704 had fired at me, he came around, was not aware of his surroundings, ran into me, could have killed me, but he wasn't playing the situation correctly. Aside from the fact that he almost, TK'd me, which just like that kind of thing just drives me nuts. It's like, pay attention, And then our bat chat has done an awesome job here with this JP100, totally trolling him. He's on reload, so he can't do anything, but all this JPE100 can do is either run away or try to ram him, and thankfully for me, he backs up and gives me the kill shot there. So this is a very different situation than Malinovka. It's a really good tank, the Ravioli. I think it is balanced because it's very fragile, and it can't run away bravely very effectively. But I think, if you play it smartly, it's a capable tank, and it's certainly a lot of fun. And like a lot of other Tier 8 mediums, it is a very good credit earner, even though I'm sitting here running with premium food, and I had a premium repair kit equipped for the passive bonus that I burned as soon as my engine was knocked out. So definitely not, overpowered in my opinion. I think the win rate in my stats show that this tank isn't overpowered, but it's pretty capable and fun when played correctly. So we're going to be looking at the Sheridan and possibly the Covenanter in future episodes. Please post your feedback and share your thoughts below. Take care.